Okay, let's try this again with the orientation the right way on the camera. Got my heads off. Right now I'm just honing the block. I've already gone over all these surfaces with a straight edge paint scraper style razor blade and scraped as much of the carbon and gasket material off as possible. I also cleaned up the top so there's not a lot of debris that's gonna fall down from there. This is the next project, but I'm gonna wait till I get the heads on before I pull my oil cooler out. I'm gonna replace that since they can clog up over time. I might run this for a little while before I replace that and allow it to catch some of the debris that gets into the engine from what I'm doing right now before I put a new one in. Anyway, these heads look like they may have been surfaced once before. It's hard for me to tell, but I've got all the carbon, all the gasket that I can scrape off, taken off with the razor blade, and now I've got this 1200 grit, 400 grit combo honing block, flattening stone, whatever you want to call it. It's basically just a diamond sharpening stone, but it's an 8 inch by 3 inch sharpening stone. And I'm using this because it'll have a lot less grit come off of it than an actual physical stone block. Well, if you're trying to stone this surface with a stone block, those are essentially sandstone typically, and you can get more sand into your engine than what these notorious engines have in them to start with. So I recommend not using a physical stone on this. Don't use sandpaper on it. Don't use anything that has a grit that can come off and get stuck in these passages, because that can ruin your injectors. It can clog up your fuel filters, or sorry, your oil filters. It can clog up your coolant filters or damage your IPR valve. You just don't want any grit getting into this engine, any dirt getting into this engine that you can avoid. So this 1200 grit, and I won't be able to show you very well while I'm holding the camera, but I'm just taking it in circular motions, reversing the circular motion and trying to go across the entire surface of the mating surfaces of these heads. You're not trying to remove any metal, you're just trying to clean it up so that you get a good seal when you put your new gasket in there. I like felpro gaskets. We're gonna obviously stud this engine. There's no reason to go back with anything other than studs. They're kind of pricey, but they're well worth it in my opinion. They'll hold these heads together a lot better than any of the standard bolts will. And you can't reuse your stock bolts anyway, because they've already been stretched from the process of installing them the first time, and they're not going to go back in well after that. So that's what you got. I'm going to keep cleaning with this block. I may or may not update once I get this all cleaned off. It's pretty well done now. I need to take some brake cleaner on a rag and clean it off. I don't like to spray brake cleaner down into the cylinders, because you're going to remove any lubrication that's currently on the walls when you do that, and you may cause some issues when you go to start it if these cylinders are completely bone dry with no lubricant left on them. So there we go. I'm going to start cleaning. I've got the heads out of my 2005 Ford Excursion. Even though it says 2005, I'm pretty sure this is an earlier 2004 model based on the oil pump in this vehicle. But you can see where there was a head gasket failure here. There was a head gasket failure here. There's likely a head gasket failure here. And a lot of this head gasket had places in it all around the cylinders, but especially here in the middle. And this is typically where they fail, in between the two cylinders. You do want to check, make sure that all your valves are properly seated. I've got all the rockers taken off, the push rods removed, so there shouldn't be anything holding these valves out. So they should all sit a little bit shy of the surface of your head, and these all do, so I think those are probably fine. That's one I haven't cleaned. Here's one that I've gone over and cleaned. I've taken a diamond stone 1200 grit diamond stone to this, as well as brake cleaner on a rag, and cleaned off as much as I can. There are a few spots here that's not going to clean up. That's actually pitting in the face, but since it's not in the way of the cylinder sealing, it's sort of in between the head gasket areas, I'm not going to worry about that. There are no areas where there's pitting where the gasket's going to seal to the surface, so I'm not concerned about the ones that are outside of the seals. But if we have to do this again, we'll probably buy new heads or have these resurfaced. So that's what it looks like after several hours of cleaning. I use WD-40 on the surface and that 1200 grit diamond stone, and then use brake cleaner on a rag, parch cleaner, to clean this periodically, as well as to clean the stone. So I'll let you see this once I'm done with it. All right, I've switched places with the heads on you, so just to show you that this isn't the dirty one laying over here. This is the head that was over there earlier. I've gone over this with a razor blade to scrape as much of the loose carbon and soot and buildup off here as I could. Try to get it pretty clean. There's definitely some pitting, but all the pitting that I've found is outside of the sealing surfaces, or in between them here. So I'm not concerned about any of the pitting that I've found yet. It probably wouldn't be a terrible idea to take this out and have it surfaced, but looking at this, I think it's already been surfaced once. I'm not sure how much more material you can take off of it and still have it be a viable head. I'd like to get this thing put back together. I don't have time to wait for new heads to come in, so I'm going to try this, and I'll update you if the whole thing explodes on me and blows another head out. I'm just using a WD-40 type of product, so I've used PB Blaster, WD-40, Knocker Loose. Any of those penetrating oils will work for this. Just something to help keep all this debris that's coming off here from sticking to my diamond honing block. So far, I think this is going to work. I don't see any reason to think that I'm damaging the surface. You want these surfaces to be a little bit rough anyway, so that your gasket will seal to them. You just want to make sure that it's as close to perfectly flat as possible. But as far as having machining marks in it, I've heard a lot of Ford guys say that really you want this to have a little bit of a finish to it, not just a smooth glassy mirror finish. I don't recall what they called it, but it had a roughness to it that would help hold those gaskets in place and keep them from slipping off and blowing off. So I'm hoping that hitting this with a 1200 grit diamond block will be enough to achieve a good seal. I've probably spent 30 minutes on this so far, maybe 45 minutes. I'm going in a circular motion just because when these get machined, they have a circular head that does the machining, so they end up with circular grooves or circular striations in the material. So I'm hoping that I'm as close as possible achieving what they would have with a Bridgeport mill or something resurfacing these heads. I know it's not going to be nearly as good as what you would get at a machine shop, but this is how it was done for the longest time. I suspect it'll be okay on here, even though these engines are operating at a much higher compression and much higher forces than a lot of the old time engines. I still believe this will be fine since we're putting studs in there. But yeah, you just want to make sure that wherever your seal is going to ride, that surface is cleaned up and doesn't have any debris left on it. And then at the end, I'm going to take this and I'm probably going to spray this whole head with parch cleaner or brake cleaner, or at very least take a couple of rags, clean rags, and wipe it down and get rid of as much as possible of the oil residue, so that gasket has two very dry surfaces to bond to. And we're going back with a felpro gasket. Okay, that's really about all there is to it. I'm probably going to spend another 20 minutes or so just taking that honing block, wax on, wax off, and then I'm going to replace the exhaust manifold bolts and plug her back in the car.